Mike Palmer is the music director and conductor of the Altoona Symphony Orchestra. When did you first start working with the Altoona Symphony Orchestra?
Well, it's been a long time, actually. I was thinking about this the other day, and it was 26 years ago. Last month was the first time I conducted the orchestra as music director. So it's been a long time, and I've worn a lot of different hats. I was music director for several years. Then I left and came back as principal pops conductor, and then came back as artistic advisor, and then started back as music director. So this is my first full season back as music director the second time through.
Why do you keep coming back?
I love this community. I love the orchestra. This is a community that takes really great pride in the arts, and the orchestra most especially. It has a rich history and long history, actually. This is our 94th season, and we're one of the oldest orchestras in a smaller city in the United States, maybe the oldest. We were a founding member of the League of American Orchestras, and again, it's that pride that the city and its residents take in the symphony, and certainly in our theater, the Mishler Theater, which has been restored a couple of times and is an absolutely iconic theater with great acoustics and just beautiful to look at. And the history of who's come through here is pretty amazing. Who's who of music from, you know, the turn of the century on, the turn of the last century on.
Now we are sitting here in this historic theater, and it really is beautiful. A lot of different paintings and ornaments throughout that. As a conductor, when you're performing, does having a space like that matter?
Oh yeah, it's great. I mean, it's definitely an enhancement to the music for us, because when we look out in rehearsal and we see the beauty of this theater, and you can almost feel the resonance of who's performed here before when you're here, and it just, I don't know, it just adds a real richness to what we do. And certainly the way the theater's been restored has really aided in the acoustics, because when you use a certain kind of paint and you have certain kinds of resonating surfaces, both small and large, really affects the way the sound goes out to the audience. So I think people who come and are able to hear in this theater the way the orchestra sounds are really amazed by how the theater helps the sound of the orchestra.
Now, you talked earlier about Altoona as an arts community, and how important is the community engagement for the orchestra?
It's huge. We have a very dedicated audience. People really feel strongly about the symphony, and we do a lot of things here in terms of outreach, outdoor concerts. We're starting a series of chamber music events. We do a lot for children. We do a discovery concert series. So there's a lot of different things that we do to engage the community, and also we like to collaborate with different groups from the community, from local ballet to our two wonderful local high school choruses to local performers of all kind. In fact, the performance that we're doing this weekend, we're featuring a really terrifically talented pianist who grew up here and has been all over the world, but he's back here now teaching, and we're thrilled to be able to feature Anthony Cornett this weekend.
Now you also have special events like Halloween, where you do different types of programming.
Yes.
It seems like, just reading about some of the music that you were there, Twilight Zone theme and so on, it seems like you're having some fun with that.
We do. We like to have a lot of fun. And the programming is such that we want to be very inclusive to the entire community and bring as many people in as possible, and especially people who have never been to a classical music concert. We want this to be a comfortable experience for them, so we make it casual. I mean, if someone wants to dress up and have a wonderful night on the town, great. We're thrilled that they do that. But if someone wants to be casual, that's fine too. And the way we handle it from the stage, at least the way I do, and I think musicians do as well, is that we want this to be a welcoming experience. So I speak, before pieces and talk a little bit about the history in a very casual way, as I mentioned. But that's all about bringing everyone in the community in and just telling the community that everybody's welcome.
Let's talk a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up?
I'm from Boston originally, and I got my bachelor's degree at Harvard and my master's at New England Conservatory and doctorate at the University of Iowa. And I actually started conducting at a really young age. I started when I was about 16, and then had an opportunity to do some conducting in high school, quite a bit in college. So when I was out of college, I already had a little bit of experience. So I got my first full-time conducting job when I was 26. And I've been employed ever since.
Take us back to being 16 years old and conducting for the first time. What did that feel like?
Well, it's very difficult, and it's kind of an awkward thing to do when you don't know exactly how the mechanics work, and there's a lot of brain that goes into it. You have to be able to hear, like if you're doing a rehearsal, you're hearing what's happening, you have to think about what's going to happen, and then you have to remember what just happened. So you have all those different levels of remembering and hearing. So it's pretty scary. It's funny because we have, every once in a while, someone will come up to guest conduct, like maybe win an auction, and they get to conduct the Stars and Stripes or something. And I mean, I've had CEOs of major corporations that have been just, really, really afraid to get up in front of the orchestra. So yeah, it's something, it's like anything else. It's like, being a director in film or being a doctor or surgeon, whatever. It's one of those things that takes 10,000 hours plus until you start feeling comfortable. It takes a long time.
When did you first kind of feel that spark of love for music?
When I was younger, I would say 12 or 13, my parents were big symphony fans, and they would go to the Boston Symphony every Tuesday, and I would go frequently with them, and then they would go to the Boston Pops when Arthur Fiedler was there, and they would take me, and I started playing instruments, I think I started the piano at the age of 5, and I did music ever since. So, yeah, so I would say, when I was in my early teenage years was when I started really getting excited about it.
Is that when you knew you wanted to do it professionally?
I think when I was about 14 or 15, I decided I wanted to be a conductor, and I had no idea how that was going to happen. And the reason I got to conduct when I was 16 was I'd written a piece of music, and the group that I was performing in, the Massachusetts Youth Wind Ensemble, the conductor asked me if I would direct my piece with the group, and I said I didn't know how to conduct. So I would go into Boston to the New England Conservatory of Music every Friday afternoon, and he'd give me a conducting lesson, which was wonderful of him to do that. And that's how I started to learn how to do it.
So take us from there. You leave school, you go to college. What is the path of a conductor like as you're learning and being educated?
Well, the educational part's really important, and then the experience part is really, really important. So for me, I really wanted to get a job as early as I could, so I just finished my master's degree, and I was able to get a job as associate conductor of the Jacksonville Symphony in Florida, which is a full-time symphony. And I was doing a lot of, normally when we start out doing those kind of things, like as an assistant conductor, you're doing children's concerts and family concerts and covering in case somebody gets sick and, the conductor gets sick, that kind of thing. So it was good experience early on. And after I'd done that for 4 or 5 years, when I was about 30, I decided I really wanted to be in charge of my own orchestra. So I applied for a bunch of jobs, and we moved to Dubuque, Iowa, which we love living there. We lived there for 13 years. And by then my wife Dorothy and I already had one child. And it was a great place to raise our son, and 2 more came along when we were there. And then we moved from there to Kentucky. We lived there for 13 years, 13 years in Iowa, 18 years in Kentucky. And now we live in Charleston, South Carolina. So I've always had 2 or 3 jobs at any given time. Right now I have 3, and I'm giving up 1 because I want to have more time here in Altoona.
Oh, well, take us into the day in the life of a conductor. You have a show in the evening. You wake up in the morning. What is your day like?
It's pretty crazy. Like when I'm here, it's normally I would say it's about a 14-hour day because you get up and I answer emails during breakfast. Then I study scores every morning. That's my kind of my routine. Maybe have an afternoon meeting, luncheon, and then several meetings. Then we have rehearsal at night. Like tonight, we have rehearsal from 7:30 to 10. So I'm not done till 10. That's when I eat dinner and try to relax a little bit before getting up at 7:30 the next morning. Which so it's crazy. And normally I travel to I live in Charleston, South Carolina, but I travel to different places to conduct here, and also Indiana, and also Massachusetts.
Now, when you're approaching a score for the first time and thinking about it, what are you looking for, or how are you analyzing it?
That's a really good question. So I go through it several times, and I always make an outline of what I'm doing with each time that I look at the score, and I keep a log. And so the first time I'll look at it, I'll look at very general things. Then maybe I'll get into specifics like the orchestration, which is how the parts are written for different instruments, or the harmony, or how does the melody work. And then I start putting it all together in my head. And it probably takes, in order to be able to do it well, I probably have to go through the score maybe 6 times at least. And each time maybe it's an hour or so or more, hour or two. But every time I do a piece again, it's easier, but I learn more about it. Like we're doing this weekend the Rhapsody in Blue by George Gershwin, and I looked at the score, and this is the 22nd time I've done it. So I've done it a lot and over many, many years. So you get used to it, you learn more every time you do it, and so that's nice. It's a cumulative knowledge.
When you first start working with a group of musicians, are you communicating with them a vision of how you see the music, or what are you trying to work out?
Well, ideally, the number one thing you want to do is realize the composer's vision of how the composer wanted the piece. And then there are certain things that are up for interpretation by the conductor, like maybe how long a note is, or how short a note is, or which instrument plays louder than another, or things like that, or whether you want to take a little time here or slow it down or speed it up, or especially when you're dealing with composers from 200 years ago, a lot of times they didn't write in the music exactly how they wanted it. So you have to, interpret it based on what you know about that composer. But lately, like if we do a piece by, let's just say John Williams, if it's a Pops concert, he's very specific about, having written all kinds of film scores, exactly how he wants all the music. So you just basically do what he tells you to do.
Now, when you're doing a live show, of course, we've all seen video and film of conductors that it can be very dramatic. What are you trying to communicate to the musicians during the concert?
Well, what we want to do is during the rehearsal we want to get all the work done. So there's a lot of work to be done, and what you're doing in rehearsal is you're preparing the orchestra to have a performance. And then when you get to the performance, you want to make it sound like the piece was just born, and you want it to come alive. So that's what I'm always thinking about when I'm making when we're doing a concert. We want it to sound like it's fresh and new, and this is, we're giving birth to it.
So as you're conducting during the program, are you able to change things as the music is unfolding?
Certain things you can change, mostly the speed, or we call the tempo. You can change that a little bit. You can't change a lot of things though, because things have already been set in the rehearsal, so there's a limited amount of things that you can change. But the main thing is just to get people fired up, and you want to count on the synergy of the orchestra playing together to kind of launch the piece.
Now, when you're playing in front of an audience, you have people reacting to the music.
Right.
Can you tell when people are excited about a piece?
Usually when we're done with it. It's funny because in Europe, 300 years ago, people would clap in the middle of a piece, and that's a different tradition that we don't really have now. I mean, I wouldn't mind if somebody clapped in the middle of the piece. I wouldn't, like when we do a symphony that has 4 movements and somebody claps after the first movement, I don't, turn around and shush them or something. I just kind of nod and we go on or something, because I don't want people to feel like there are some special rules that they have to adhere to come to a concert, because we're trying to break the mold of that. You know what I mean? It's not like some kind of ivory tower academic experience coming to a concert. We want it to be something that's really fun.
What does it take to be a really skilled musician?
It takes a lot of practice, It's, just exactly what the conductor does. You need to work very hard, and it's very competitive. Any position in music, from being a conductor to being just a musician in any orchestra, it's very competitive, and there's a lot of people that want to do it. So you have to work hard, and you have to be diligent, and you have to come prepared to rehearsals and certainly to a performance.
Now, when you're as a conductor and you're selecting music for a particular concert in the evening, how do you structure it? Do you start with something lively to get people in, and then what is the kind of mood of it as it goes over time?
That's pretty much, me anyway. I mean, I like to have something that gets people excited at the beginning and at the end, and a lot of interesting things in the middle. We try to have a lot of variety in what we program. For example, this concert we're doing this weekend is called Music of the Americas, and it has music by 2 American women composers. We have part of the first symphony ever written by an African American woman that was played by a major orchestra. We have music by Native American, Mexican composer, Brazilian composer. So there's a lot of variety. So we don't always have that much variety, but we like to have variety. In other words, we don't like to do exactly the same thing throughout the whole concert.
So do you have a routine before you go on stage, before a live show?
Not so much, except that I don't eat before a concert, because you don't want all the blood rushing to your stomach, so I don't do that. But after, I eat a lot, so not so much. I mean, personally, I like to have a little quiet time between, like for example, here we have a rehearsal ending at 4:30 and the concert's at 7:30. So I like to have a little time to decompress and just relax. And it's funny, when we have a rehearsal late in the afternoon of a rehearsal, I always kind of start to feel tired, because my body's telling me, you've got to conserve strength for the evening. And so I kind of listen to that and try to relax a little bit.
Now, you've also conducted recordings. What's the difference between doing a live show in front of an audience and being in a recording studio? Oh,
yeah, it's completely different. So the recordings that I've done, the last several have been with the London Philharmonic at the Abbey Road studio. And what we do is, the orchestra doesn't even get the music in advance, which is kind of amazing, and it's difficult music. So we start by playing about 3 or 4 minutes of the music a couple of times until they get used to it, and they usually get used to it really quick. And then the engineer will say, okay, stop, and then go back to the beginning, and we'll go back. And then they'll say, okay, let's see if we can do a take. And we'll do a take of about 3 minutes. And then we do the next 3 minutes, and we go through the whole piece like that. So it's completely different. Whereas when you're rehearsing, you might go through a really long section and then maybe fix some things and then go on. So it's different. Complete, and then they edit it, when they do a recording. You mentioned the Abbey Road Studios. That's a very historic location. Tell us about that. Oh my gosh, that was amazing. I'm actually going back again in beginning of September to do my 4th recording, and just walking in there is just amazing. I mean, it's sort of, it reminds me a little bit of coming into the Mishler Theater because of the history. You walk in and there are pictures of Elton John and the Beatles and famous conductors, Herbert von Karajan, whomever. And there are 4 studios, one gigantic studio that they do orchestral recordings in, and then they have a smaller one that they do maybe film recording, and then they have 2 smaller ones, one of the Beatles used to use, and then a tiny one. So just walking in there is amazing. And you will run into people from time to time. Famous people will come in and out, and they don't let anybody in there. I mean, in other words, someone off the street can't walk into Abbey Road Studio. You have to have a reason to go there and have to be on the list and everything like that. But there are all these people waiting at the gate to get in and screaming. And then, of course, there's the sidewalk, and everybody's walking across getting their picture taken and all that. So they'll think the Beatles
did. You walk across the sidewalk?
Oh, yeah, sure.
You've talked about many of the different places where you've conducted. How different are communities in terms of the type of music that they're interested in?
You know, it's interesting. In the United States, the communities are very similar. I mean, everybody loves having an orchestra. That's one of the things that when Europeans come here, they note that, you know, all these cities have orchestras. When I go sometimes to Europe, it's a little bit different. Maybe they'll have more rehearsal time, or they'll do things differently, or the orchestra is more or less cooperative than they are here, depending on where it is. You know, maybe they have traditions. One time I went to the Czech Republic and conducted, and they were very, very strict about their traditions and how they wanted everything to be, and they didn't really want to change anything, and that, you know, that's fine. In England, when I've been over there, they'll do anything you tell them to do, and they're all very extremely polite. And even when with London Philharmonic, and these are people that are just unbelievable players. I remember there was a guy playing the timpani, and somebody said, you know, that guy usually plays for the London Symphony, and he played the timpani during all the Star Wars films with John Williams. And I was thinking, oh my gosh. And we went through a piece a couple times, and he made one mistake, and then he said, he raised his hand, he said, "Excuse me, maestro, I'm so sorry that I screwed up. I won't do it again." And I'm like, okay, you know. I mean, these are like amazing musicians, so it just depends on where you are.
Now, earlier we were talking about some of the community activities that the orchestra here in Altoona engages in. How important is it to bring in younger generations to be interested in this music?
It's hugely important, and that's why we do things like when we had the Halloween concert, and we do a concert at Canal Basin in Hollidaysburg, which is a really beautiful amphitheater, and families come, and it's an opportunity for kids to be exposed to music at a young age. The pianist who's performing with us this weekend started to go to the Altoona Symphony when I was here before, maybe 25 years ago, and he was young, very young, and it was a real inspiration to him to go into music. So we certainly think that you know, having kids come to hear the orchestra in the different places that we perform is really important.
How important is mentorship to a career in music? You mentioned as a young teenager receiving guidance on conducting. How important is that?
It's huge, huge. And I mentor several conductors and help them out just because I think it's important for people to do that. And there were people that did that for me, several. And I think it's important for somebody that's been in the career for a long time to help younger people.
As you look forward, everybody's always looking forward. What types of goals do you set for yourself as a conductor?
Well, every time I approach a piece of music, I learn something, and I approach it as if it's the first time through. And I work very hard, and I feel that I have a real responsibility to the composer and to the orchestra, and that's why I don't show up for a rehearsal unprepared, and I don't take anything for granted, and you know, just continue to work hard and continue to do the best job I can.
What advice would you give someone who's watching this interview and is thinking, I want to be a conductor too?
Well, you can do anything. I mean, anybody can do anything, and I think that it's important that for people who want to go into conducting or music in general, that as long as they realize that they have to really want to do it and they have to be willing to work really hard, anything's possible.
Well, Nick Palmer, music director and conductor at the Altoona Symphony Orchestra, thank you for speaking with me.
My pleasure.